Hi, good evening. Thank you everyone for tuning into today's session. Um, while we just give it a couple of minutes for others to join, can we have some of you introduce yourselves, what you're doing, your name, um, so that we have an understanding. I mean, our facilitator has the understanding of the crowd that she is addressing to.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'm Anuradha David. I'm a lecturer. I teach zoology. I'm headquartered in Dharwad and I work in an affiliated college, Kittle Science College. Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening to everybody. This is Venkatramaya from Kannur, Andhra Pradesh. I am working as a Juvenile Justice Board member and maintain an NGO, especially specific on child rights and related acts. So these are my introduce. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining, sir.
Thank you,
Good evening, madam. I am Vinod from Nellore, representing the CWS NGO. We are working for the women and children. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir, for joining. Anybody else would like to introduce yourselves? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for those introductions. Thank you, everyone, once again for tuning in. We are super excited to discuss about one of the unspoken, very much neglected, and one of the niche topics that that is very crucial for us during this age and time. And we have a very eminent, very profound intellectual speaker, Jayachitra Lalitha. Thank you so much for um, accepting our invitation to address us this evening, Chitra. So Chitra, a little brief about Chitra. She is a Koine Greek teacher. She has done research in areas like religion, post-colonial feminist theory, and praxis. I don't know what praxis is. Human sexuality, gender equality, gender sexuality, caste, nexus, etc. She's the author of a book called as Household Relationships, and then she's an editor of 2 international published books. She is a PhD scholar herself. She's mother of a son, and she's based in Bangalore, overseeing one of the organization called as Ecclesia. We are really thrilled on hearing about this topic from you, Chitra. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. It's such a joy to be part of this Zoom meeting this afternoon. I extend a very heartfelt thanks to Chris and her wonderful organization called Red Row. It is a timely discussion that is required, especially as we work in the social service sector. We realize that gender sexual minorities are totally neglected in the welfare system as well as in the holistic social development. of course, my topic is a broader theme. Soji SC is a broader theme of covering all nuances and dynamics of gender and sexual varieties. As I would love to share the screen. Yes. Yeah. SOGIESC is an acronym for Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity and Expression, and Sex Characteristics. This is an international term used to talk about multiple varieties of gender sexual identities. Before I dwell on the slides, let me ask you all if you have already been involved in any way, either in research or social work, on or among gender sexual minorities.
I have had instances where few of my friends had different orientation, and I had a distant relative who was struggling in convincing his parents about it. Yeah, so I've had on and off interactions
Okay.
about.
Okay. Is it a gender minority or a sexual minority? Or, I mean, is it a trans person or a gender fluid person or a
Uh,
gay?
yeah, so a couple of them were gay, and
Okay.
this other distant relative that I'm talking about was considered himself, related more himself as a transgender.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Chris, for sharing that. Has anyone else had any close acquaintance with gender sexual minorities?
Sorry. Hello.
Yes. Someone trying to speak, please.
Now, what is your exact question, madam?
Have you come across any trans person or a gay person, or have you worked among gender sexual minorities is my question.
Okay, okay. Already in Nellore, AP, we have been working with the transgenders.
Okay, okay. That's
Transgender
great.
and also MSMs also. Okay.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we have some friends who have already exposure to the life situations of gender sexual minorities. Of course, SOGIESC is certainly referring to gender sexual minorities. However, it has a broader perspective of human sexuality. So each one of us as an adult would adhere to a particular sexuality. We could be a heterosexual, a homosexual, or a bisexual. And when we talk about sexuality, I think this definition is very important to read. Human sexuality is the capacity of humans to have erotic experiences and responses, and not necessarily the physical attraction between male and female. Sexuality, this is important. Sexuality is the ability to have physical, emotional, mental, spiritual attraction to another person. It need not be predominantly due to hormones. The major components of sexuality are sensuality, intimacy, relationships, feelings, and gender sexual identity. Okay, so SOGIESC is a broader umbrella term which talks about various nuances of human sexuality. And this word, Soji Sc, as an acronym, stands for sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics. We will go in each one of these aspects of this acronym. Before that, how do we perceive our own sexuality is very important in understanding the broader picture of human sexuality, as well as the sexuality of people who are different from us. So I would like to encourage all of us to have a clear perception or a clear understanding of our own sexuality when we plunge into understand about human sexuality as a broader term, as well as various aspects of this acronym SOGI Sc. Now, I just presume that all of us are heterosexuals. I mean, that is not a right presumption to start with for this particular topic. However, or let me start with a more general question. How do you understand heterosexuality under human sexuality? What is heterosexuality? Heterosexuality is one topic which we ignore or neglect when we are so much caught up with trying to understand or explore into homosexuality. However, many a time we fail to understand what heterosexuality is. I am of the opinion that we have not fully understood the various dynamics of heterosexuality. Before doing that, if we try to understand what homosexuality is, perhaps we will fail to understand. And homosexuality, of course, is just another form of sexuality. Now, let me say this. When we talk about SOGIEC, it would be good. I would definitely go in detail into each one of this: gender identity, gender expression, sex characteristics, and sexual orientation. Perhaps to start with a very simple video that would help us to have a brief idea about what it is.
Chitra, while sharing the screen, please check in with the computer audio. We can't hear the audio. Chitra, we can't hear the audio. Chitra, we can't hear the audio.
Did you say, Chris?
We can't hear the audio. While sharing the screen, you'll have to check in the option which says with computer sound. Unshare it, stop sharing it.
Okay.
And then when you share, uncheck the button which says with computer audio.
Okay. So I should say share computer sound.
In order to get on the same page about LGBT youth homelessness, let's first talk about.
Are you able to hear? Are you able to hear now?
Yes, ma'am.
Between sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. They are all different. We think of each existing on a spectrum. Being on a spectrum means that there are more than just two ways to be. There's a whole range of ways to be. Sexual orientation describes an individual's emotional and/or physical attraction to another person or people. Gender identity refers to a person's innate identification as a man, woman, neither, both, or some other gender. A person's gender may or may not correspond to the sex assigned to them at birth. While gender identity is someone's understanding of their own gender, gender expression refers to the way that a person communicates their gender to the world. It includes all of the external characteristics and behaviors that are socially defined as either masculine or feminine, such as dress, grooming, mannerisms, speech patterns, and social interactions. Social or cultural norms can vary widely, and some characteristics that may be accepted as masculine, feminine, or neutral in one culture may be assessed differently in another. It is important to note that someone's gender expression may or may not align with traditional perceptions of gender identity. Again, gender is a spectrum. It's important to remember that there are more than just two ways to be.
Yeah, so we go back to our slides. So the video that I showed talks about gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. Let's start with gender identity and gender expression. Gender identity is all about how one thinks about oneself. Now, in order to understand gender identity, we need to have this basic differentiation between biological sex and gender identity. Now, what is biological sex is the biology to which we attribute ourselves to as a man or as a woman, depending on the biological reproductive organs. But gender is all about the demands of the society, how a man or a woman should behave in a society. Now, when we talk about the gender identity, it is all about how a person perceives about their own self in their minds. So, how a person understands themselves as a man or a woman. And this is the usual binary we have about gender. But now we live in a life context where we have about 58 gender identities scientifically proven. Now we are still struggling with male, female, and trans people. We have not explored any existence of human beings beyond these gender identities. Even within these three gender identities, we know more about men and women, or male and female gender identities. And very few of us, as someone said, they work among transgenders, perhaps they have more exposure to understanding what a trans person's gender identity is. Otherwise, most of us are stuck in this binary of male and female gender identities. Now, when I say gender identity is how one person thinks about their own self, that is why when we meet a trans person, trans woman, they say that I was born a man, I was born a boy. As I was attaining my puberty, I begin to realize in my head or in my mind, in my heart, that I'm not behaving in a way my biological sex demands me to be in a society. I feel that I should have been born a woman. Therefore, the exploration into one's gender identity begins at that point of time. Now, being born as a boy or a man, and then they begin to want to identify themselves as female or women, then they realize that their gender identity is not going in line with their biological sex. So gender identity is something that a person with their own brain understand themselves as. Now, I mentioned that there are about 58 gender identities scientifically proven. Now, when I say that, we need to understand the broader spectrum of gender realities, gender identities. And how is gender expression different from gender identity? Gender expression is all about how one manifests their gender identity in maybe the way in which they dress, the mannerisms they follow, or the way they want to exhibit themselves as a woman or a man or a trans woman. From their way of behavior, from the way they dress, from the way they show how they want to identify as, gender expressions are revealed. Now, gender identity, gender expressions draw our attention to how people could be gender fluid, how people may not be fully able to identify themselves as man or woman fully. There may be a human existence where they feel that they are both male and female, or in some other cases they may feel that they're neither male nor female. So gender identities are various expressions, and this helps us to think about the gender fluidity. That means this binary notion of male, female, and trans identity need to be understood in a much broader sense. Therefore, when we talk about gender identity, we need to understand that there are many more gender identities which we have never come across in our lives. And people express themselves, their own identities, their own gender identities in different ways. And that is totally depending upon every single person, and there cannot be any universal way of expressing our gender identity. Now, when we talk about this, before we get into sex characteristics and sexual orientation, I would like to show another video from YouTube. I'll just this. Chris, are you able to come to that?
Do you want me to share?
Share the second video, second YouTube link.
Do you know what's the name?
It comes in the second as it comes as Soji Sc.
Okay.
Second one, yeah.
Hi, my name is Hayden, and today I'm collabing with Youth Voices Count. They're a regional LGBTQ+ organization, and I'm going to provide the information in the descriptions below. Today's topic, we're going to talk about SOGIE SC. What is SOGIE SC? SOGIE SC stands for Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity and Expression, and Sexual Characteristics. Here is a genderbread person to help me further explain. I want to remind you that the human sexuality is very fluid and diverse, but that doesn't mean the labels cannot help us understand. Sexual characteristics refer to the biological anatomy of an individual. This means we are talking about genitals, internal reproductive organs, and hormones. Sex is a marker that doctors use to assign babies. They are usually assigned as male or female at birth based on if they have a penis or a vagina. But what if a baby is born with ambiguous genitalia? This baby is intersex. These two sex markers perpetuate the sex binary and erases intersex identities. This is problematic because doctors will enforce unwanted surgeries, misinform parents, and possibly abuse other human rights. Gender identity is one's personal sense of being as a man or woman or non-binary or both or neither. Gender identity is not equal to your assigned sex at birth. For example, if you were assigned male at birth and you identify as a man, you are a cisgender man. If you were assigned male at birth and you identify as a woman, you are a transgender woman. If you are assigned female at birth and you identify as genderqueer or non-binary, you are a genderqueer or non-binary person. Now, gender expression is how one presents themselves to the world. Gender expression can be expressed through clothing, hair, accessories, makeup, mannerisms, speech, and other forms of outward appearance. Sexual orientation refers to who you are attracted to. For example, you can be heterosexual, bisexual, or homosexual. If you are a man and you are attracted to the same gender, you are gay. If you are a woman and you're attracted to the same gender, you are a lesbian. If you're a woman and attracted to men, women, and or any gender, you are bisexual or pansexual. And if you're not attracted to any person, you are asexual. Although sexual orientation refers to who you're attracted to, we can define attraction in different ways. Like I said, the human sexuality is fluid and diverse. This video covers the basic definition of sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sexual characteristics. There are many resources out there that explore these topics more deeply. But for now, I hope you learned something today. Have a gay day. Bye.
Okay. Yeah. So now we come to, as you have watched this video, it goes a step further to explain sex characteristics and sexual orientation. Now, if you look at these two briefly, sex characteristics basically refer to chromosomes, biological sexual chromosomes, glands, sexual glands like testes and ovaries, then the hormones like testosterone and estrogen, and the reproductive organs or the genitals, penis or vagina, or breast, or any of the sex reproductive organs and the chromosomes and hormones. All these refer to sex characteristics. Now, when we talk about sex characteristics, I would like to talk about a group of people called intersex. Intersex are a group of people who are born with any of several variations in sex characteristics. There are intersex people who are born with various mix and match of sex characteristics. Generally, we attribute XY chromosome to male and XX to female. And then we attribute breast, vagina, ovaries, uterus to women or being female. But in intersex cases, you will have a kind of mix and match. That would be the right word to use, because you may have a variant of chromosomes, or you may have the male chromosome, but you may also have female genitals or female hormones in your body. So intersex people are now asking them to be the third gender, because this is a discussion going on among SOGIESC that who would be considered as third gender? Is it transgender or intersex people? Now, there is a lot of ignorance about human sexuality and these various nuances and dynamics. And then we get into discussion and debate without knowing what the facts are, then it leads to further confusion and complications. However, as of now, as a Zoom group, we need to have clear understanding about what sex characteristics are. I believe that you have a clear, you got an idea about what gender identity, what gender expression is. Just now I explained what sex are. After I explain sexual orientation, we can have a time for clarifications. Now, sexual orientation is not a choice a person makes, or if we think about each one of ourselves, we did not wake up on a fine morning and decide to be a heterosexual. Okay? Can you hear me clearly? Yeah. So it is not a choice that we make, but it is an inclination to be attracted to another person. It is emotional and sexual attraction. Not as a choice of one person, but as an inclination. This word is very important to understand sexual orientation. In earlier times, at least in 80s and 90s, there were many theories spoken about sexual orientations to say that this should be treated. If any sexual orientation different from heterosexuality is treated as a disease, and then it can be treated, it can be cured through counseling or through other medical interventions. So the idea of treating a different sexual orientation other than heterosexuality and treating it as a mental or physical disorder has been prevalent among us. Even today, it is the idea of many. However, we need to understand that it is not the case. Sexual orientation is an inclination to be attracted emotionally and sexually to another person. It could be anyone. And we live in a predominantly heterosexual society where attraction or sexual attraction and further the institutions like marriage, producing progeny, all these are related to a man and woman coming together in a sexual relationship. Therefore, it becomes very difficult for a common person to understand sexuality beyond this narrow confines of a man and woman coming together in marriage and to raise a family. And we have always associated human sexuality within these narrow confines of a man and a woman. But now, sexual orientation, as I have briefly mentioned earlier, there are about 15 sexual orientations scientifically proven all over the world today. And we are still struggling with heterosexuality and gay sexuality. We still haven't fully understood what heterosexuality is or what homosexuality is. Now, there is always this struggle to understand and accept what is known to us. It's all about the familiarity, acquaintance with human sexuality. And we value or we attach value to the more predominantly visible, the more predominantly accepted sexualities. Now, as a heterosexual person myself, it is easy for me to understand a man-woman relationship. And as an adult, it is easy for me to talk about heterosexuality. But when we talk about sexual orientation of different people, we also need to understand that there is a new normal. As we talk about corona, there is a new normal about something that we have never known about, and now we become exposed to, and we try to understand what it is. And it is always difficult when something new comes on our way. It was the case when we all were hit with COVID-19. We never expected something like this. We never knew that we could lock ourselves inside our houses. We never knew that we can live our lives without going insane in a house, and we keep seeing the same human beings whom we never wanted to see earlier, and still we survive. And therefore, we learn to live with, or we learn to develop some coping mechanism when something new hits our lives. We don't need to go that far. We just need a little more open mind to understand what sexual orientation is. It's all about a curiosity to know what we don't know, and also a little more just oriented viewpoint about people who are different sexually from us. And also to know that human rights belong to everybody. Not a person's gender or sexuality decides how a person to be treated with respect and dignity. Therefore, when we talk about sexual orientation, we know heterosexuality is people getting attracted to the opposite sex. And in human sexuality terms, someone who is heterosexual is commonly referred to as a straight person. And a person who is gay, who is involved in gay sexuality or homosexuality, is called as gay. At this point of time, we don't use even the word homosexuality. We use the word gay sexuality, because even when you say gay sexuality, it has many expressions, manifestations, and nuances and dynamics. So we cannot, I mean, it would be appropriate to talk about it as gay sexuality. Now, when we talk about homosexuality, it can be the sexual attraction of persons who are different, who are similar sex or same sex. They can be gay or lesbian. Now, we also need to understand that human sexuality has been perceived in line with one's religious understanding. Now, mostly, if you look at the criminalizing same-sex was from a colonial time, and it has very strong root in Christian scripture. And in Hindu or Muslim or Jain or Sikh, if we read the religious text, all these different sexualities existed, and these religious texts were not shying away from talking about it. However, those who adhere so much to religious identities always had, comparatively much lesser tolerance to different sexualities. Okay, now I spoke about these four aspects of SOGIESC, and I have two slides which I'll read for your better understanding. Yeah, SOGIESC initially evolved as Soji, or Sogi, as some people call Sogi. Sogi refers to sexual orientation and gender identity. This is an inclusive acronym used to talk about both sexual orientation, the type of sexual, romantic, and emotional attraction that one has, the capacity to feel for others, and gender identity, that is the internal perception of one's gender and how they label themselves based on how they align or do not align with what they understand gender to be. SOGI is most often used in the United Nations and in the context of international human rights. Now, this acronym has developed further into SOGIESC. It is sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics. This is an inclusive acronym like SOGI, which includes gender expression, the behavior, the mannerisms, interests, and appearance a person uses to express their gender in a particular cultural context. Very, very important. And sex characteristics, physical or behavioral traits of a person which are indicative of their sex. The expanded acronym SOGIESC is newer and is most often used by non-governmental organizations, often in the context of international human rights. So this is the brief introduction to SOGIESC. Do you have any questions or any clarifications? we need to be clear at this point about these four phrases: sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics. If this is clear, it will be easy for us to identify the issues related to SOGIESC.
I think we can continue.
Hmm?
I said, I think we can continue and see how.
Okay. All right. I would just love to see all the participants. Okay. All right. So now the issues related to SOGIESC is about, it can be divided into a few. First, I would like to talk about how this gender sexual minorities are marginalized in our society. Yes. Now, we live in a context where heterosexual cisgenders are treated to be the normal, in quote and unquote. Now, as people of NGOs, as people who want to be more concerned about people belonging to gender sexual minorities, how do we approach them? Or what is our understanding of mainstreaming them? Mainstreaming trans persons, intersex, and gays. Now, it may be much more easier for us to talk about trans people, mainly because of our familiarity with them. Compared to if I take this few minutes to talk about trans persons, intersex, and gays, perhaps in general, I have found that it is easy for us to talk about trans persons or trans women. Even many of us may not have seen a trans man or a woman who has gone through the sexual reassignment, rearranging surgery and become a man. We are more familiar with those who are born boys, grown into male, grown into as men, and then opted or made a willful choice to be women. So it becomes easy for us to talk about trans persons. Now, it would be a very good that we have a trans person to talk to us. However, as I belong to an organization called Ecclesia Center, which has gender sexual minorities as one of the focus groups, we constantly interact with trans persons. And as an ally to gender sexual minorities, I would like to talk about them as persons who long to identify as women. They just don't like to be treated as somebody different from a woman. However, in Indian society, we women are not trained, we are not psychologically trained to accept them just as one among us. Now, it becomes all the more difficult for a man to accept them as a woman because for them, the perception of them about a woman is so different that they don't attach that perception to a trans woman. Now, this causes a social distancing. And this is why when social distancing was used during COVID-19, many groups protested because we are already in a society which practices social distancing. Caste, class, gender identity, sexual identity, age, and so on and so forth. So in such a context, social distancing only brings back to our minds the way we discriminate other people from us. So as far as trans women are concerned, their longing is to be identified or included into the mainstream society as a woman. Now, they have this gender identity of a woman. They identify themselves in their minds, in their brains as women. And then they have this gender expressions in the form of wearing a sari or wearing women's clothes. And then you have them more mannerisms of a woman. But we belong to the dominant community which does not accept them, include them as people who are women. Now, this is a challenge. And briefly talking about the intersex people are people who are born with varying sex expressions. I have a friend who was born with male genitals, male external genitals, but he menstruates. That means he had a uterus, and while he attained his puberty, he realized that he had a uterus, but he did not have a vagina. Then his whole posterior part bursted out because there was no way out for this menstruating blood to come out. And there are friends who were born as female, but then they found that they were also having male gonads like testes. So their hormones are more like a male, but they are born with external female genitalia. We have friends who are living right now in our society. I would like us to watch a video. Perhaps that would help us. It would be good for us to get a very good understanding of what it's all about.
A very good afternoon to one and all. To start my speak with, I would like to tell you, for you, it may be out of your 1,000 days, this is one day that you are here. But for me, it is those 1,000 days what I have dreamt of being here for this one day. To start with, my name is Daniel Mendonça, and I'm an intersex. You may be wondering what is intersex, what is this I from the LGBTIQ community? I represent the I from the intersex. To give you a short definition about it, it means that people when they are born, at their birth, looking at their genetical organs, the doctor cannot confirm whether it is a male or a female, or the other way round is that you may go to a chromosomal disorder, like for girls it would be X and X, for the boys it would be X and Y, but for me it is XXY. So I have the X extra in me, and therefore I am more feminine than masculine. So to start with my new beginnings, when I was born, doctors discovered that there is something wrong with the child. So when they did a test, they found out that I am a complete male from outside, but I had all the eternal organs of a woman from right within. And therefore I was defined as an intersex child. When the doctors went around telling my father, they said ki a eunuch has been born at your place. And listening to these words, my father decided to give up on me. He went to my mother and told that whether you give away the child or whether you choose me. But I'm proud that my mother chose me because She said, I'm going to make this child so capable that one day he will stand and not just represent India, but will represent me at every stage when he goes. Journey went on. I first used to say that I was different, but today I will say I was unique. When I was born, when I was growing up, I never felt like a man right within myself. I always felt like a woman. But the price that I paid of feeling like a woman was too hard. I was born and brought up in a slum of Mumbai in Khar pipeline, where talking about sex and sexuality was a taboo. Still today in India, we are fighting for women's rights. And there, when I am standing on this side of the stage and talking about LGBTIQ rights, it's something that makes me, myself, proud. When I was growing, like always in India, people started calling, "Arey, ye to chakka hai, ye to baila hai, ye to good hai," and all the derogatory terms that one has to listen. But you know, that was not only the words that I heard, but along with me, my mother kept hearing it. She never allowed me to go out and play. She never allowed me to getting out because she was afraid that someone would do something to me. But life had to go on. I was 4 years old when my father sold me to the eunuch. My mother fought and brought me back, and then was a terrible time that I went through. I went to a boys' high school, Sacred Heart Boys' High School in Santa Cruz, and I always felt that I was the only girl among all the boys there. It was very difficult. Whenever I went to use the washroom, my seniors used to come, open my pants, rape me, and I had no words to say. I was raped at the age of 8 by my own cousins. And when it reached to my father, he said that children like you is better learn how to get raped because that's the only work that you will be doing all your life. I'm sorry, but yes, life had to go on, and so it went on. I was in 4th standard, the first time when I was discovering myself who I was, and I always questioned, why out of everybody, God, why me? Why me? And then I was in 4th standard, and it was the first time I went through the menstruation. There was no part from my body for the menstruation to come out. And so my anus tore into 2 parts, and all the intestine along with came out. 8 years of my life, I left studies at 4th standard because I was not very comfortable. I came from a very small family background from a slum of Bombay. After many surgeries and things like that, there was no one to take care of my family. I didn't know what to do. And the only job that I had to take up was doing prostitution and begging in the trains of Bombay for me and my mother's survival, because we didn't even have food. And who would at that time give me a job? Who would at that time would give me a job because of my feminine nature? My life changed. My first new beginning step came when I was begging on the streets of Bombay in the middle of the night doing prostitution. When I was getting down from a train, there was a woman in front of me, and I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, can you give me a way to get down?" And she said, "How do you speak such good English?" I said, "Ma'am, I have been in a convent, but yeah, I know to speak English." She says, "What do you do?" I said, "I do prostitution and begging for my survival and living." She said, "Would you like to study?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't know study and me. I still know my table still 5 genuinely. I decided to give her a chance. I decided to not limit myself. And I went to do my 10th standard. She put me into a private 10th board, and I was giving. It was difficult again because I was doing prostitution in the night, begging, going there, studying. And first time it was in my life that I was doing maths, geometry, science, algebra, which I had never seen before. But I think I passed. I passed at the first go with 43%, and that was the life's biggest achievement I could ever aimed of. I didn't know what to do next. My mother said, "Do you want to study further?" I said, "Yes." I took up 11th and 12th in arts. College was same as everybody else. I never used a male washroom because of the fear of getting raped again. People kept on teasing me. People went on telling all kinds of things about me. Ye to chakka hai, ye to baila hai, ye to good hai. And you know, when I was walking on the streets, they used to come and pinch me from back and do all nonsensing. And I said, why can't I speak for myself? One of the time it came that my new beginnings again was that the class teacher came up to me in 12th and said, Daniel, there's a debate competition. And why don't you share your story and talk about the whole elocution competition and the debate on LGBTIQ issues? And it was the first stage of my life that I stood there. I spoke about my life and I could see tears in everybody's eyes. And the tears were not understanding a particular community, not understanding a particular person, not understanding a particular person's life, we become judgmental and start giving comments on people's life. And then we laugh at them because they are different. And I could see acceptance, I could see more acceptance. 2014 changed my whole life. A small child born in the slums of Bombay did prostitution begging, never thought could represent the United Nations in 2014 for LGBTIQ rights and represent India on behalf of the intersex community. Life was turning. Life was turning. I was scared. I spoke. I cried. But when I stepped down, I was not satisfied with what I did. Because I was fighting for myself. The thought came, what are the others going to do outside there like you, Daniel? And there came the point when I took a stand on working for the LGBTIQ issues on two main important topics. One is equal world with equal opportunities and creating inclusive and safe spaces for all genders. I did my graduation in Bachelor's in Social Work. I was scared to use the toilet, but I was very open about my sexuality. I was speaking that time about it openly, and people used to judge me, and I said, thank you, Mr. Judge, for judging me. People asked me this question, when did you come out? I said, I never came out. I came out only once, and that was from my mother's womb. Next time, I never came out. I was as normal as everyone else was. You considered me to be not normal. I went into College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan. 6 months, I didn't do anything. But my one question kept on tripping me is, am I the only student who's going to be again? No. I fought for a separate toilet, a demanding separate toilet that I should be felt comfortable because it is my right. And first time in the University of Bombay, College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan held a separate toilet for me and made a reservation that transgenders and LGBTI community would be free to use this toilet so that we create inclusive spaces. Life never stopped there. The new beginnings kept on. And the next time, I didn't knew that I took a silver medal from College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan, in my graduations. To pass with the silver medal is the first intersex in the University of Bombay. And that has shown me the importance of creating those inclusive and safe spaces for all genders. I was stopped at my inauguration ceremony. They said कि यहाँ पे कुछ function नहीं चल रहा, आप बधाई मांगने के लिए क्यों आए हो? And when my name was announced and I walked proudly, I could see the whole crowd standing there. And I was awarded with Vidyarthi Bharati Ratna Award, one of the prestigious award for students academics. What is new beginnings? What is new beginnings? If you ask me, I'll tell you what is new beginnings. New beginnings is accepting yourself the way you are. No matter whether you are fat, no matter whether you are black, no matter how you look, you are beautifully created and made in the image of nature. What is new beginning? The only barrier that you have in your life is yourself. If you break the barrier within yourself, you have the new beginnings within you. What is new beginnings? New beginnings is one simple word, is letting life do what it is doing in your life. Because today you may fight with life, but when life starts fighting back with you, you will never win the battle. So allow life to do all the bad things and the good things. I committed suicide 3 times in my life. because I was not happy. And so does my community does that, because there is no acceptance. Because we are not ready to accept people from gender perspective. And I say, why accept people from gender perspective? I am a human before I have a gender. Before I am Daniel, before I am anybody from the LGBTIQ community, I'm a human and I have to be looked and seen upon from a human perspective. Why am I less? People ask me this question, why don't you fight for reservation? And I said, no, I don't want reservation. I want to sit among you, compete with you in the race to go, and prove myself that I'm as much better as all of you sitting here are. I would have never achieved all these things without my enemies in my life. And I praise my enemies before my friends. Because when they kept discriminating me, I forced them to accept me. And there were the changes. When you know what you're fighting for is right, then don't think what the world has to say. The same world will tomorrow listen to you and say, oh, this person said it the correct way. Today, I'm not afraid what people have to tell about me, but people are definitely afraid what I have to tell them. So I always tell this, the beef ban and the gay rights in India have something in common. It is a majority of the people deciding for the minority what they can and can't put in their mouth. If you understand it, good. So even I tell people, if you do not accept people of LGBTIQ, it's fine, that's your choice. But you do not have the right of discriminating them on any basis. Your religion values cannot come before human rights. You can believe in a God who's Ardhanareshwar. You can believe in the Mohini Avatara of Krishna. You can believe in Shrikhandi of the Mahabharata. Why can't you believe in human like us which are seen? They are not seen. Why can't you? The simple question is, why can't we accept people the way they are? Is it so difficult to ask for acceptance? Is it too difficult to ask for love? Today, I feel proud of myself for not giving up in life. I told you, right? Before that, I used to talk about God, why me? Today, I'm also asking the same question. God, why me? Life is changing. I'm going to platforms I'm talking about. But my success, people judge success by money, while I judge success by respect. Unless and until not a single person of the LGBTIQ community is respected in this country, I think my work will never end. My work will never end. Signing out with the message that let's create an equal world with equal opportunities. Creating inclusive and safe spaces for all genders, I think is an idea worth sharing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I was not planning to show the whole video, but then I thought it would be good to listen, and I really wish Daniel were here to talk directly. Maybe Retro should think about inviting Daniel for a conversation with you, because when you encounter people with very, very challenging experiences, your perceptions on human life and sexualities will change. Now, two challenges Daniel has placed before us: equal opportunities, an equal world with equal opportunities, and secondly, providing safe and inclusive world, inclusive spaces. To this, I would add what we as allies of SOGIESC should think about is how we can work towards mainstreaming them. It is not about just talking about them and feeling sympathy for their life experiences, but to make sure that we mainstream them so that they become very much part of the mainstreamed society. Now, this is a hard challenge to all of us. We live in a world, a very competitive world, where all of us are running in a race for finding resources, finding opportunities, finding employment. And where do we have the space to pause and think about mainstreaming Soji Sc? And I would like to challenge all of us, as we are related to churches as well as NGOs and social spaces. It should be our aim to see how we ensure a safe and inclusive space for people belonging to Soji Sc. People people of Soji Sc in crisis. We don't need to think that all of them are asking for the cisgender heterosexual people. But as cisgender heterosexual persons who have wider knowledge of human rights and having a heart to ensure equality, we need to think about ways in which we can mainstream them. I think I'll stop now and ask for any of your questions that will help me to get into a conversation with you. Otherwise, I have done with what I wanted to share as an initiative for the conversation this evening.
Yeah, sure. The first question that I have is sexual orientation a learned behavior? What does science say about it? Do we have statistics or science backed up with studies that prove only straight orientation is natural?
What is natural?
Straight.
Straight, okay, okay. Yeah. We need to first define what is natural. It comes from our social conditioning that heterosexuality is natural. And then we use heterosexuality as a criterion to decide whether other gender sexual expressions are matching to it to be treated as natural. As I mentioned to you earlier, there are many theories like epigenetic theory, brain structure theory, hormone theory, and there are many more researches or theories developed to understand homosexuality. But as of now, in this present time of research, it is not looked at even from the perspective of natural or unnatural, because we cannot bring that binary into understanding gay sexuality. It is not a choice that they make, okay, from today onwards, I'm deciding to be attracted to a person of same sex. It is not so. When we say inclination, let's think about us as adults. If you are a heterosexual, how you have experienced your inclination to emotional sexual attraction to a person of opposite sex. Did you train yourself? Did you make a willful choice? How did your sexual inclination you have begun to experience? You need to think in those lines rather than whether it is natural or unnatural. Otherwise, we will be subjecting our own sexuality into this binary of natural or unnatural. If we look at human sexuality in a broader term, the way a person expresses sexual love to another person needs to be based on mutuality. If not, it becomes a violent action, rape. And therefore, the way sexual expression, even in a heterosexual relationship, becomes a mutual understanding. And then the persons involved decide whether it is natural or unnatural. Having said that, it is high time that we stop looking at human sexuality as natural or unnatural. And sexual inclinations happen as part of one's identity and sexual expressions. And we need to give that space and dignity and respect for a person to exercise their right to their own sexual expressions. Therefore, gay sexuality, in my opinion, cannot be viewed as unnatural or even put under the scrutiny through natural unnatural binaries.
So if in that case, do you think it is more biological that their hormones are dictating their orientation?
See, Chris, we need to understand that our sexuality is a combination of our sex organs, sex hormones, and our chromosomes, sex chromosomes. And I would add to these three that our own brain's wiring about our sexual identities and sexual expressions. If I talk about female sexuality, it is very much revolving around the monthly cycle, monthly menstrual cycle of a woman. So, on which day a woman feels her sexual urge in a higher level is totally depending on a combination of the hormones, her menstrual cycle, and her own personal interest and personal likes and dislikes about the person involved in sexual relationship. And it's all about the fantasies and likings, ideas, concepts, all that is wired in a person's brain. Therefore, we cannot judge a person's inclination to a particular person except in a very, very subjective. And your question is whether it is biological. It is the whole aspect of human sexuality is biological. I mean, referring to our biological existence as human beings.
Okay. Tina has a question. She says, many strangers with gender crisis that she's come across, when they dig through, they find that it's due to parenting problems. So her question is, at what age does gender identity start developing in someone?
Okay. We have friends dealing with psychological development of SOGIESC who say that a child's psychological development with regard to that person's sexuality begins as early as their toddler stage. A child looks at their own body in a curious manner and to see how their own touch of their own bodies create sensations in their minds is a beginning of how a child begins to perceive that child's sexuality. Now, I mean, masturbation could be found among children. Perhaps they may not know that they are generating pleasure out of touching their genitals, but then they find security and comfort and pleasure in doing that, which shows that they have begun to experience their sexuality. Therefore, we can see the perceiving of sexuality by a child at a very early stage. Even before the child knows what sexuality is, the child begins to explore the sexuality, the body, the sensuality of his or her body. Therefore, when we talk about how parenting can affect a child's perception of their own sexuality, it becomes very important. Because in our culture, we see parents inhibiting children's natural curiosity about their own sexuality. When parents see children exploring their sexuality, the first impression parents impose upon children is either of fear or shame or guilt. So the child begins to identify that sexuality is something that can cause shame. Parenting needs to look into this very seriously, that their interventions in a child's exploration of their sexuality should not hinder the possibilities of a child's mind to understand human sexuality. So for that, parents need to be aware of human sexuality. And in many cases, parents themselves may not have grown up in a family situation where they could freely talk about sexuality. And in our context, sexuality is a taboo. Therefore, sexuality is not freely spoken about. And when they deal with their own children, they would be perhaps imitating their parents' parenting styles. So that can go wrong.
So she has a follow-up question which says, which is the right way to teach kids?
Which is the
right way to teach kids?
Right way to teach kids. Okay. Now, Now, our organization has a campaign called Women Dunamis Women Teachers for Holistic Sexuality Education. We focus on high school students, and we also have plans to develop sexuality education for lower primary schools or lower primary kids. But as we have experimented with high school students, I found that it is a right time to talk to them as a third person, as a person not belonging to their family. But for parents, I think they should start as early as possible. As they witness the children's curiosity to understand their own sexuality, parents sexuality education. A very basic understanding of human anatomy is very fundamental, and the children need to understand the role and how they treat their bodies and how they identify their sexual organs and how they get a right perception of their bodies. All these are very much related to parents and teachers. And parents need to, as we have now more access to online information, parents need to talk to their children about human sexuality. Especially children during their puberty are more inquisitive about their sexuality, and it would be a right time for parents to do sexuality education.
Okay. So is bisexuality, being a bisexual, is it normal? I heard one of my doctor friend or somebody tell that basically women are born, or women keep having this, women are bisexuals. So the question is it normal or is it influenced due to movies and culture? And if you can also shed light in specific to women.
Okay. Some research say that all the human beings, oh no, not all the human beings, 98% of human beings are bisexuals. It may be, it is debated, but our socio-cultural location and our, definitely, predominantly our socio-cultural location determines how we develop our, or how we manifest our sexual inclinations. however, if we look at the hormones, female and male hormones, the presence of it in human bodies can determine how we express ourselves more feminine or masculine. And if people are more adventurous, trying it out, and especially in a time like this where people would uh, venture into trying out, this could also be possible. And yes, and you mentioned that women are bisexuals.
Yeah, I mean, like one of my friends.
Your friend mentioned about. I have not come across anything particularly as such. Maybe if you refer to sexuality not strictly in terms of a sex act, and if you give more importance to emotional aspect of human sexuality, uh, I mean, women may be expressing themselves more emotionally with one another than an opposite sex. I mean, I'm just trying to connect the dots, but
But I
I
think,
should say that I'm not sure of it.
but I think that your statistics about that mostly all human beings are bisexuals, I think that supersedes whatever my friend says. So the follow-up question is it influenced behavior? Is it influenced by movies and culture? Or
It could be. It could. See, even as heterosexual persons, uh, don't you think that our understanding of sexuality is so much conditioned by all the movies we have watched? And in real life, perhaps you will realize it may not have any connection to your real aspects of life. So perhaps all that fantasies created in our minds, watching from movies or viewing very romantic couples, may not be the real case. And human relationships, especially such a very private relationship as a sexual relationship is, uh, I mean, it is totally between two persons how they decide about it. So uh, how they go about it is very, very private affair. Yeah, and certainly we are all socio-culturally conditioned to be.
okay, um, so Samson has a faith-based question. His question is why the church is still not giving the permission to transgenders.
It is unfortunate. It is very sad that transgenders, even the transgenders who have become Christians, don't feel that they are socially accepted in a church community. I'm talking about the mainline churches, but there could be independent churches who work among transgenders who love to mainstream transgenders in their worship places. Yeah, they are attempting to have them as very much part of churches. But it's very unfortunate that we don't have that happening in our mainline churches. It has become more institutionalized that they don't want to take any risk with any so-called variance or different from the normal men and women groups. That is very unfortunate.
Okay. Um, Neeraja has a question saying, what is the difference between sexual and gender identity? Biblical perspective on sexuality and spirituality.
Yeah, once. Yeah, sorry.
Do you want me to repeat?
No, I lost the page.
1 second. Okay. I have, yeah. Can you please repeat a biblical perspective?
First question is the difference
Okay.
between first question is difference between sexual and gender identity, and then biblical
Okay.
perspective
Okay.
on sexuality and spirituality.
On spirituality. Okay. I thought this is a mixed group. I mean, if I talk about biblical perspective, see, the male and female identity is highlighted, I mean, biblically. However, we have a transgender identity talked about in the Bible. We have many cases of the word eunuch is used in the Bible to talk about people who are not male nor female. And regarding the sexuality, I mean, are you talking about, because human sexuality is a broad perspective. What exactly do you have in mind, Nircha?
Chitra, since it's a mixed group, I think we'll leave that question. But definitely difference between sexual and gender identity, the main difference. For suppose if I have to speak to young people, how do I make it clear to them? I think she. You
Can
are
you hear
mute.
me?
Yeah.
Yes, Nircha, ma'am.
Just wanted to have a difference between sexual and gender identity.
Uh-huh. No, in the beginning of our session, I very clearly explained. Okay, sexual. See, biological sex is we are born with uh, certain, I mean, sexual identity as man and woman, and gender identity is how we are expected to behave in a society. Now, the gender identity is how one person perceives in their mind as a male or female, and how that person express that person's self to others. So, gender identity goes closely with the gender expression, the way that person expresses their identity as a male or a female or a trans woman or a trans man. So that becomes the way they identify internally as well as the way they express themselves outwardly. So sex refers to biological sex, the way we are born as man, woman, or even intersex. Intersex people are born with varying sex characters and sex organs. Thank you. Chris, do we have any other questions?
Yeah. Any other questions from the participants?
Tina says, I don't think there are male-female personalities being emotional or true emotional. No, I agree with you.
Maybe do you want to answer Neeraja's second question, which was asking about sexuality and spirituality?
Okay.
I told her actually, since we have a mixed groups, I said it will be good that we concentrate on the focus things not on you.
Yeah.
But if you can, whatever, it depends on Chitra. Yeah.
No, I mean, first of all, connecting sexuality with spirituality I mean, that itself is a bit stretching one, in the sense that if we begin to understand spirituality with our perception of sexuality, which many of us do, in fact, that is the saddest part of it. But I think it will lead into much more complications than that exists today. So I prefer that we don't mix our spirituality and sexuality, but all of us, I mean, when we talk about our spirituality, it's our whole self is involved in our spiritual life. So we don't make a discrimination of keeping sexuality away, but if we begin to understand spirituality through sexuality, that may not be in the right way to do, or the other way around.
Sarah Joseph, do you have any question? I've seen you raise your hand.
My internet connection is unstable. Queer identity. What is their gender identity? Okay, we call them gender fluid identity. Because queer is an umbrella term again to have varying gender sexual identities. Gender queer could be a group of people who don't really match their biological sex with gender identities. They could be men, but they may be doing cross-dressing, or the mannerisms could be feminine, or the other way around. So gender fluid people are people who don't strictly adhering themselves to a particular sex or gender identity. I mean, there are varying ways of expressing their identities. I would encourage that you explore ways to meet and acquaint yourself with gender fluid persons. So that you will be able to understand them better.
Thank you everyone for those comments and appreciations. I think we are good. We do not have any questions, Chitra. I think you've explained it very clearly and in a very simplified terms. So I think that has sorted a lot of questions for us. Thank you so much, Chitra, for taking time out for us. And thank you everyone for joining. If you have further questions, you want to get in touch with us, get in touch with Chitra, please let us know.
Yeah, you can get my WhatsApp number from Chris or even email. I would love to be in this journey of research as an ally of SOGIESC.
Sure.
You can have some more. You can have some more sessions also after a break. Yeah, with a new dimension, new perspective also.
Yeah. Yes, we'll do that. Okay.
So thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, friends. It is such a joy talking to all of you.
Yes, I hope this session has given us a little more aware and has made us it will make us a little more inclusive and open to people in accepting them. Thank you everyone. Have a good evening. Have a good weekend.
Thank you very much, Chris, and all of you. Thank you.